Hello, and welcome to this short workshop on Pranayama. Pranayama is the fourth limb of yoga. After asana, after we learn how to control the muscles with downward dog, cobra, strengthening, conditioning, but most importantly awareness, consciousness, control. The fourth limb is pranayama. We turn our attention to the breath and we begin to learn how to regulate our breathing. Prana means life force, or the energy that leaves the body when we die, or the animating force. Yama means control. Pranayama, control of life force, or at a most basic level, control of breath, the simple mechanics of breathing. Okay? So we start with mechanics and then we move on to patterns and other more refined practices. But it all starts with the diaphragmatic breath. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and at the very bottom of Maslow's pyramid in psychology, he had the physical survival, immediate physical survival. And then you look at his second level, and he has the sex, reproduction. There's a lot of different ways of phrasing this. The third level, power. The fourth level, love. Sometimes people say compassion. And then the fifth level, he terms self-actualization. And if you think about it, that's very close to the 7 chakras. The only difference is, instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels, we have 7. And when you look at them, they match until we get to Maslow's 5th level, at which point the chakras, we have 3 chakras left. Instead of self-actualization, at the throat, self-knowledge, third eye, wisdom, and the crown, illumination. So he takes those 3, compresses them into one idea, self-actualization. In his later models, he actually added 2 more layers. And his later model of the 7 of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs matched the chakras almost perfectly. Now, I take that bottom layer, survival, immediate survival, and I divide it further. So Maslow talks about food, shelter, water, a lot of different things that you need in order to survive. But I refine it a little bit more. I was doing a workshop with at-risk youth, teenage boys, about 16 years old. I asked them, what's the most important thing in the world to you? And there are a few answers shouted out until one smart aleck shouted out sex, and then they all chimed in. They were pretty sure that was the right answer. Okay? I challenged them. I said, imagine going for a week without eating. Do you really think you'll be worried about sex? Okay. Imagine going for 2 days without water, and you'll forget all about being hungry. Imagine going for 2 minutes without oxygen, and you'll forget all about being thirsty. So for me, Maslow's hierarchy of needs starts with oxygen. Of all the needs, nothing is more important. Maslow's big insight was that if the basic needs aren't being met, nothing else matters. There's no point talking about love if someone is freezing to death. Okay? If they're freezing to death, you need to address their core body temperature, get them warm. Okay? And there's no point worrying about their core temperature if they aren't breathing. Okay? So for me, it starts with the breath. And when you consider how essential breathing is, it seems to me one of the greatest crimes that we are not taught as children how to breathe. It's just assumed that everybody knows how to breathe, and that is not the case. I know for myself, when I first started yoga at the age of 11, I was a chest breather. Okay? It took me several months to retrain myself to breathe correctly. Once I did, then for the rest of my life I've been practicing abdominal diaphragmatic breathing. So let's take a look now at the lungs. And if you look at the shape of the lungs, they're kind of shaped like pears. They're big at the bottom and they are small at the top. So the first thing you'll realize is thoracic breathers, chest breathers, are breathing in and out of this area of their lungs. Diaphragmatic breathers are breathing in and out of this area of their lungs. So when we breathe diaphragmatically, we get a much greater supply of oxygen into the blood. Not only that, we have better control. Any voice teacher is going to teach you how to breathe diaphragmatically. We sing from the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is the muscle with which we breathe, and it's shaped like a big salad bowl. So imagine you turn a salad bowl upside down. So that's a salad bowl upside down. And then nestled in here between the two lobes of the lungs is your heart. And the heart is attached to the diaphragm through connective tissue. Okay. Above the diaphragm, the lungs, the heart, thymus, a few other things. Below the diaphragm, you've got your liver over here, you've got your stomach, you've got your pancreas. In the back, you've got your kidneys lower down, large intestine over the top, small intestines nestled in between. And so the diaphragm separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Now, if you think about it, that's an important, essential separation. Think about what's above and what's below. Above the diaphragm, heart, lungs, brain. Okay? What do you need if you're being chased by a tiger? Well, you need your muscles, but you also need the heart and the lungs to pump oxygen to the muscles, and you need your brain to make smart decisions. Okay? So, when we're in a fight-flight, the blood is cut off to everything below the diaphragm, and all of that blood and energy is going to the muscles and to the lungs and the heart and the brain. Okay? But what about the things below the diaphragm? Liver, kidneys, intestines, stomach, pancreas. There's nothing below the diaphragm in this abdominal cavity that is required to help you outrun a tiger. There's nothing down here you need to live for the next 10 minutes or 20 minutes or hour. Okay? So everything below the diaphragm is about long-term health. Above the diaphragm is immediate survival. Okay? And the diaphragm is what separates those two worlds. Okay? Sometimes we talk about sympathetic, parasympathetic. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, all the energy is going into heart, lungs, brain, muscles, okay, to survive an immediate crisis. When the parasympathetic nerves are activated, more energy is going to the intestines, the kidneys, the liver, the pancreas, the immune system, everything you need over the long run to be healthy. Okay? And the diaphragm, the muscle we breathe with, separates these two worlds. And that's not a coincidence. That's at the core of anatomy and physiology. So let's talk about the difference between chest breathers and diaphragmatic breathers. Chest breathers, as they start to breathe in, their mind is in their chest, and the very first thing they do when they think about breathing in is they expand their chest. Every time you expand your chest and breathe up into this area, it triggers the sympathetic nervous system, raises stress, fight, flight, cuts off blood flow to the abdominal organs, and over time begins to lead to chronic illnesses of a variety of sorts. Okay? Diaphragmatic breathers, on the other hand, when you breathe in, the diaphragm, instead of looking like a salad bowl turned upside down, it starts to flatten down more like a plate. So it pulls down into a much more shallow dome. And when it does that, the lungs expand into the space being created. Not only that, as it pushes down, it's pushing against the liver, the stomach, the pancreas, the kidneys, the intestines, pushing them out of the way to create space for the breath to move into these lower areas. That massaging action of the diaphragm not only increases oxygen to the lungs, it also massages the heart. Again, people breathing in the upper lobes don't get any of this. But just as importantly, the diaphragm is pushing down and releasing, so it's massaging the intestines, helping to move food through the digestive system. It is squeezing the liver and releasing, which helps to increase circulation of blood through the liver, the kidneys, the pancreas. It helps to push lymphatic fluid, which accumulates down here, up into the chest where it can be recirculated into the blood and pumped back out through the body. So it's a key to the circulatory system and to the immune system. There's a lot more we could talk about, but that's enough just to give you the basic idea that if you aren't breathing diaphragmatically, which is the way babies breathe, cats breathe, Aborigines breathe, at least Aborigines that haven't been modernized to some extent, that still live in a more primitive, quote-unquote primitive culture. So it is the fact that we've forgotten how to breathe. Even doctors will put a stethoscope on your chest and then tell you take a deep breath, and then they lift and expand their chest to show you how. If you ask me to take a deep breath, the first thing I think is belly. And only then ribs, then chest, and then shoulders. And then I breathe out. As a result, I have a far greater volume than the average person. My lungs are a little bit bigger. When I've had my lungs measured, they are larger than most people's lungs. But more significantly is that I use every part of my lungs when I'm breathing. I breathe into the upper back, the mid back, the low back, into the belly, into the ribs, into the chest, into the collarbones, whenever I choose to. I don't do that with every breath. I do that occasionally. My go-to default breathing pattern, the way I breathe when I'm not thinking about it, when I'm watching TV. If you snuck in and watched me sitting on the back deck having a cup of tea, you would see that my chest is still and my belly is moving. And then every once in a while, I take a complete breath. So an abdominal breath looks like this. I'll breathe with my mouth so you can hear. This area expands. The reason is the diaphragm is pushing down and the stomach has to go somewhere, so it expands out. And then on the exhale, so the chest is still and the movement is in the belly. Okay. The best way to practice diaphragmatic breathing is not sitting. That's one of the hardest positions. Standing is a little easier, but the go-to position for learning how to breathe is laying on your back. As you lay on your back, the rib cage is immobilized due to the pressure of the floor, and then the belly is more likely to move. If you have a couple pounds of rice, I collect bags of rice. I look for stitching and I look for handles. And this is a 2-pound bag of rice. I also have several 10-pound bags of rice and a couple 20-pound bags of rice, and I use those as yoga props. They're a lot cheaper than buying sandbags and then getting a bag and still having to go out and buy sand and fill it and all the trouble of that. And shipping a sandbag is more expensive than buying a bag of rice. 10-pound bag of rice should cost you about $8 to $10. Go to an Asian store or an Indian store and they have a variety of different, dozens of different brands, and then look for which one has the best stitching and the best handles. Okay? 2 pounds is about right for learning how to breathe. I place the bag on my stomach so that it spreads the weight. A book doesn't work. It's too hard and it sits and pushes on one point. I want to spread the weight. And then in Shavasana, as I breathe in, the belly should be rising, and as I breathe out, falling. If you don't have a sandbag or a bag of rice or pinto beans, one hand on your belly, one hand on your chest. And then you notice, is your chest moving or is your abdomen moving or both? And over time, you want to learn how to not force the chest to be still, but allow the chest to become still. Focus on breathing into your belly and allowing the chest to do less and less, the abdomen to move more and more, until eventually your chest doesn't move at all. When you can breathe diaphragmatically without the chest moving, it has a calming effect on the nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system begins to slow down, the parasympathetic nervous system is stimulated, and the very active breathing diaphragmatically, breathing down into this area, is telling the brain that everything is okay. Now, just intuitively, get a sense of what you think is happening to me physically, mentally, emotionally, my heart rate, my blood pressure, my state of mind when I breathe in two different ways. I'm going to breathe with my chest, and I'm going to breathe a little chaotically. Then I'm going to switch to a slow diaphragmatic breath. Okay? I'll make noise with my mouth so you can hear the breath, and I'll move my hand up and down as I breathe in and as I breathe out, so you can see visually and hear what's going on with my breath. So let me start. Chest breathers have a very irregular, erratic breathing pattern, which I just demonstrated. I exaggerated a little. Okay. Now, compare that to this. Breathing down here, breathing in. And breathing out. I'll see if I can make a little more noise so you can hear. The chest hasn't moved, that's all abdomen. And then the exhale. And then breathing in again. Now, I exaggerated both extremes just to make the point. Do you have a sense that when I was breathing up into this area, that my mind was speeding up, my muscles were tightening, my heart rate was going up, my blood pressure was rising? And did you have a sense that when I switched over to a slow diaphragmatic breath, that the nervous system began to calm down, blood pressure falling, heart rate slowing, and the parasympathetic nervous system began kicking in, opening up the arteries, feeding the intestines, the liver, the pancreas, all the things you need to be healthy in the long run, the immune system. That very simple act of shifting the breath from the upper chest down into the abdomen, that one simple habit can make a profound difference in the quality of your life, both immediate quality in terms of your state of mind, but also over years and decades, the health of the liver, the intestines, the immune system, all benefiting from your breath. If you're new to breathing, Shavasana is the perfect place to practice diaphragmatic breathing, but also we do Shavasana on our own every night when we go to bed. So as you're falling asleep, lay flat on your back for a few minutes and practice. One hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, lying on your back, breathing, just remembering how to breathe where the chest is still, the belly is moving. Okay? When that becomes second nature, and we want to get to the point where you do this when you aren't thinking about it. It's no good having great breathing patterns for 1 hour once a week when you practice yoga. Okay? It's the other 23 hours of the day, 7 days of the week. How are you breathing when you aren't thinking about it? The good news is, this is diaphragmatic breathing, abdominal breathing is how you were meant to breathe. It is the interference of the brain, of modern society, of habits, of bad posture that has prevented you from breathing well. Now, the reason that is the good news is that once you restore the basic, true habit of breathing, it requires no further effort to maintain. The body remembers how it should be breathing, the way a small child breathes or a baby breathes. Imagine looking at a very small little bitty baby, 3 weeks old, laying on its back. Can you imagine if you saw it breathing with its chest and shoulders, how alien that would feel? Okay? Just intuitively, instinctively, we know that their bellies rise and expand and fall as they breathe. Okay? And it's that quality that we're looking for in our diaphragmatic breathing. Okay? When you can do this comfortably laying down where it's second nature, then you begin practicing standing up. That can be a little more difficult, takes a lot of people more time. You put one hand in front, one hand behind, and then squeeze. And then as you breathe in, try to push both hands apart. Push back into the kidneys, push forward. And then as you breathe out, and again, the chest is still. The belly expands and contracts as we breathe in, as we breathe out. And the chest is still. When that becomes easy, then begin thinking about breathing diaphragmatically when you're in a seated position. And eventually, this should be the default position. If you aren't thinking about it, your body's breathing diaphragmatically, and that's where you want to get to. For me, I started when I was 11, and it took me about maybe 5-6 months before that was true. That wasn't 5 or 6 months of hard practice, 4 hours a day. That was 5 or 10 times a day, taking just a moment to think about it. Okay? Falling asleep at night, taking just 5 or 10 diaphragmatic breaths as I'm falling asleep. Waking up in the morning, taking a few diaphragmatic breaths. That's how you change the pattern. It may take a few months, but if you just again and again and again keep coming back to it for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, notice as you walk through a door where you're breathing. And over time, your body will begin to decide that this really must be important to you because you won't let it go. And at that point, the brain will rewire itself to support or to resupport your diaphragmatic breathing. You have a new habit. A lot of effort to change a habit, but once you've changed it, the habit, the new habit, supports you without any effort for the rest of your life. Very little effort to maintain a habit. Okay? And of all the habits that you have any influence over, there's nothing more critical than the quality of your breathing. Okay? Once you have begun to master diaphragmatic breathing, then a whole world opens up of more advanced breathing practices, books and books written about breath and pranayama, prana control, breath control, and so it opens up a whole new world, and it's one of my favorite things to practice and teach, but it all starts with the diaphragmatic breath. Without that, you're building a castle on quicksand. And even for those of us who have been practicing our whole lives, I still pay attention to my diaphragmatic breathing. Anytime I meditate, probably 5-10 times a day at a minimum, I'm just enjoying breathing diaphragmatically. I don't go to the breath and think about it to try and change anything. I go to enjoy what's already happening. And that simple breath awareness, placing my mind on my breathing rather than on the news channel. And the more I do that, the more centered, the more calm, the more steady, and the happier that I begin to feel. Okay? So I'd like to thank you for joining with me, and then invite you in our yoga classes to the degree you're able to, begin embracing and adding the quality of pranayama, of breath awareness, to your yoga practice. So it's no longer just about the mechanics of the physical poses, asana, but it also becomes about how you're breathing while practicing your yoga. Thank you so much, and I wish all of you well. Namaste.